Yes, thanks, Zach. Thanks, everyone, again, yeah, for being here. If I haven't met you before, yes, my name is Cheyenne Harden, and am, I consider myself maybe Rio's survey sensei or our resident evaluation mason. One of those two titles might fit well. But this month are going to go ahead and talk a little bit about Ruffalo No Levitt's PSOL. So you can, next slide. Um, yes. So here's a definition that No Levitz has kind of used to explain what satisfaction means. And I really like that it brings out perception, because really it's what our students perceive to be happening is their reality. And if anyone's maybe traveled at Phoenix Sky Harbor, either on the SkyTrain and maybe even in the terminals, it will say, "Welcome to America's friendliest airport." And so that's kind of a very cool title that, Sky Harbor wants to own, but is that what the employees, the travelers, the community feel about that reputation? So regardless of what we think we're having done at Rio, it's really what the students perceive that matters. So next slide. And Ruffalo and Levitz is found with the year satisfaction surveys that really kind of the way campuses have used them are kind of in four different buckets, and Rio can relate to each of these very well. We can see that first one having recruitment efforts, we can try and highlight our strengths, what students are really satisfied with, what we're doing well in marketing messages, and really attract students that value the same things that we're doing well in. We can see in accreditation efforts, we know that with HLC and the Student Success Academy, those teams plan to use a lot of this data around like student engagement and needs. With strategic planning, that's also a great spot because we do this survey on a regular basis every 2 or 3 years. We have a good pulse point on how we're doing, if students are taking note of changes and new initiatives, efforts in our strategic plan. And then when it comes to retention and student success, if we see that the strengths that we have can help students stick with us, remind them of why they chose Rio, why we're a good fit for them. So we really want to capitalize on having this feedback from our students. All right, next slide. We administered this survey earlier this spring, around May, and this is the 7th time that Rio has conducted the survey since 2008. And the invitations were sent by the district office, but we targeted online only students for Rio at that time. In years prior, we maybe had some incentive, like entering a raffle for a gift card, to get students to fill out the survey. It is a pretty lengthy tool, but this year there was no incentive. But yet we still had a decent response rate of around 10%, 9.7. For comparison, our sister colleges at the district, they use a different tool called the Student Satisfaction Inventory, because it also includes things about campus life more catered to like a brick and mortar institution. And so for that tool, the rest of the colleges with Maricopa had an 8% response rate. So we're doing okay. Next slide. And here are the demographics around the students that completed it. It doesn't exactly match our student population, but we're still able to get, valuable data. We have pretty much female, full-time, and credential-seeking students that are oversampled compared to our overall demographics. So for example, overall student demographics is around 60% female. When it comes to race and ethnicity, our Hispanic population is a little underrepresented there at 24% compared to about 30, 31. And the full-time versus part-time is really, I think, one of the larger, and the credential seeking. Full-time versus part-time is closer to the 12%, full-time 83%, or 87%, around that area for um, our actual population. And then when it comes to the goals, it's kind of reverse. We would say that overall we would have closer to 75% that would be the supplemental versus 75% or so versus credential seeking. Okay, next slide. With the Ruffalo No-Levitz tool, PSOL, with the survey responses, they are able to categorize an institution's strengths, challenges, and they do this by measuring performance gaps. So the survey uses a variety of statements asking a student how important something is, and then how satisfied they are with the way the institution is operating. So a strength is something that is in the top half of importance, and then in the top half of satisfaction. A challenge is where it's still in the top half of importance, but falls in the bottom quartile of satisfaction, or the performance gap, which is the difference between the two, is in the top half. So we can see again that performance gap is the difference between importance score versus satisfaction score. And the closer that those scores are, the more expectations are being met. Yeah, next slide. Yep, so here is a kind of visualization of where those fall. The survey asked those statements on a 7-point scale. So from 1 to 7, a 1 very dissatisfied, 7 very satisfied, and the same with importance. And it's good to be noted that our challenges and strengths are identified based on our own results. It's not comparing to national benchmarks when we're identifying our specific strengths and challenges. If you want specific numbers, since I said it's a 7-point scale, strengths had an importance score of a 6.6 or higher, and a satisfaction score of 6.3 or higher. Challenges had an importance score of 6.6 or higher, and then the performance gap of 0.46 or higher, or larger gap. So really, that's a kind of a lot to talk about and kind of like get your head around, but for me, I thought it really represents well. My brain, when it talks about satisfied, automatically went to Hamilton in honor of the 10th anniversary of the musical Hamilton. Next point, you can see maybe this is how challenges and strengths could be considered, right? So our challenges, students feel unsatisfied, yet our strengths are things that we can be celebrated. So pat ourselves on the back around those areas. All right, so let's look at how our results went this year. We had 8 strengths identified, and again, that's top half of importance, top half quartile of satisfaction. This is 1 more strength than we had in our previous administration of the survey back in 2022. There's a nice feature in point number 4 there, I can learn effectively on my own. This is one of the Maricopa's kind of custom questions that we put into our survey, so it's great that that showed up as a strength. We have some of these items that have repeatedly been identified as strengths, so again, things that we're doing well. There's a slide later that'll show the trend, but the point about being convenient to register, having assignments clearly laid out in the syllabus, those have been strong strengths of ours for multiple iterations. And I'll just give you a couple more seconds to read through those. Maybe think how your work is related to that, or why this has been a strength. Get familiar with it. A second, because it's a lot and I've talked a lot.
And while we're giving that pause, there's a question in the chat. Do you recall off the top how many survey items are in the survey?
I believe it's about 36 or so.
36, and then they're asked almost to rate them 2 times, once on their level of expectation and then once on their level of satisfaction.
Exactly. So it's a lengthier survey, and it has these questions around importance, satisfaction, as well as we'll see later, there's 3 kind of summary questions of if you could do this all over again, would you, has this overall met your expectations? And I forget what the third one is, but so it is lengthy, and then there's a place for qualitative feedback as well.
Hence the use of incentives to try and boost some of those completion numbers. Adam, you raised your hand there for a second. Did you have a question?
I was actually just trying to give a thumbs up, but I'll ask one since I have the mic. Does this presentation also go over the ones where the students weren't satisfied, the top results from that category? Will we see that too? Okay, cool.
Yeah, so we'll walk through the strengths, the challenges, kind of the again, the trends that we've seen, and even if there's time and people are up for it, maybe get some ideas in discussion around how do we tackle, now that we know, wait, Rio's been really known well for doing XYZ, but we're struggling in ABC, you know, so we'll try and have some time for comments and feedback there too. So we can see here, yes, so talking about challenges, we had 3 areas that were identified in our data set for challenges. But what is nice is that this is a decrease from the last time. We had 6 items. So now we have only 3. And it's kind of worth noting also that the quality of online instruction is excellent. That again, you'll see has been like, I don't want to say repeat offender, but that's been on our radar for a while. And it's also ranked very high in importance. It was ranked number 4 overall in importance there. So again, about quality of instruction, having like a specific personalized plan, and then knowing who to reach out to for areas we can work on. All right, so let's go on to next slide here. Since I've been talking nonstop, and if you all can maybe want to keep track of how many Hamilton references I make, like kudos to you. But how would we define our strengths and challenges? So what do we think? Do we look at importance first and then satisfaction and performance gaps? Do we look at just our performance gaps? Is it our average score compared to what other institutions are doing nationwide? Or do we look at satisfaction first, then importance? And I can't see anyone's types in there. So Zach, you tell me if we think people are on the right path.
Yeah, nobody has responded in the chat yet, but I have an answer, but I feel like I'm speeding, so I'll let others chime in and type your responses in or come off mute if there's anything about this that maybe we can clarify. All right, we have a couple votes for A in the chat.
Nice. All right, yes, yay for A. That is the right answer. Yes, so we look at the importance first. How important is an item to a student? Then compare how satisfied are they with the value that the college is doing. So very good, very good. Next one, last one, just to see how many strengths did Rio have? Did we have 3, 8, 12, or 51?
The modal answer, Cheyenne, is 8.
Yes. It was 8. Yes, very good. Very good. Yeah, we had 8. That's the highest that we've had in all iterations of the survey. So we'll see those again. So you can go to the next slide. And like I said, this is kind of tracking how our strengths have been over each iteration of the survey. And like it says, we see that registration for online courses is convenient, has continuously been doing well. We have the thing about the clear syllabus, even tech support being available. That's also been a strength more than just one survey iteration. But then we look at some of these items that are no longer considered. For example, excuse me, they know how to find information on their My.Maricopa, the bookstore. And these are things that, post-COVID, we know there's been a lot of changes in how students are engaging with us, with the college on site and whatnot. So those could be contributors. And just because they're not a strength doesn't mean we're not doing them well, but they're no longer in that top quartile of satisfaction, if that makes sense. All right, let's compare our challenges then. And like I said, that quality of online instruction is excellent. It's been noted as a challenge consistently. And even that statement about an advisor having helping them to have an academic plan, that's been a challenge for 2 iterations in a row. And the channels are available for providing timely responses to student complaints is new on the scene. So here we can just again take a moment, look at some of the things that we can again work on, as well as what we have already worked on and now are no longer recorded as challenges. So kind of noteworthy to see. Okay. So in years past, we were able, again, like we said, the survey allows us to compare to national benchmarks as far as how important things are and how satisfied students are with these items. In 2019 and 2022, we were able to produce these kinds of figures to show, but the nice thing about this year, next point, is that, next slide, here it goes. Yeah, that all of our responses had a higher satisfaction and importance score than national benchmark values. So again, it's really identifying that RIO is doing some really great things. Next slide. The survey items can be lumped into kind of these 5 categories of academic service, enrollment services, institutional perceptions, instructional services, and student services. So again, like I said, about 36 questions. They can go into these 5 categories. And it's interesting that the academic services bucket, it had 3 of our 8 strengths. So that's really nice to see. And here we can see again that difference in national gap, performance gap. So again, that gap is the importance score minus the satisfaction score. The closer they are, the closer expectations are getting met. So with RIO having smaller performance gaps shows that overall, again, students are mostly feeling satisfied with what they're doing. As another just caveat, note that there is a formal written report along with all this data that goes into more detail around all of this. So that hopefully I can answer, questions that come up, but also if there's something that you feel like, oh, I still want to know a little bit more, it may already be covered in a written report that will be made available too. Next slide.
Thanks for remember, Fran.
Yeah.
Michelle, you had your hand raised. Let's pause for a second.
I just had a question on, I guess it was the slide before this, or maybe 2 slides back. There was a library question, and there was, one more slide back. There was a library question, and there was a, well, the library ones that stick out. Is that a new question? Like channels are available for, yeah, it was this one. It says channels are available for providing timely response. Was that a new question, or and the library was the other one? Are those new questions?
Sure, no.
I just asked because I just wondered.
Okay. No, I believe the same. Our custom questions are the same from 2022 for this iteration as 2025, I believe. When I compare the data, I didn't notice a changing in wording. No,
Thank you.
no problem. Okay. So here, this is an opportunity to look at, as mentioned, the demographics for the responses are different than our overall student population. So what's nice about Russell and Levitz is we have the data, and they've provided some neat dashboards and stuff too, that we're able to kind of slice and dice and look closer at specific population groups. So if we look at our full-time students versus our part-time, just even in those buckets, we can see that the part-time students, they really are putting more importance on items, and they're actually more satisfied with factors, which is great. But we could think about that. They're already stretched many different ways. Therefore, being able to get in touch with someone quickly, having a personalized academic plan, being able to register appropriately and quickly, being able to get in touch with tutoring, the library, the bookstore, all those things, their time is a little more limited potentially than a full-time student. So it could make sense that these are going to be of higher importance to them. It looks like really the part that has the biggest difference for the average score is in areas around instructional service. They have a higher importance and a really small performance gap, which is great for our part-time students. So they're really looking like their satisfaction their expectations are being met. Okay, next slide.
If I can really quick, Cheyenne, and just
Yes.
to clarify for everybody, you addressed this a couple of slides ago, but because we slipped back and forth a couple of times, students, just to clarify, aren't asked to rate importance and satisfaction of instructional services. Because as I read that, it's, up to your own interpretation what that means, right? But
Right.
these are scales that are derived from a subset of questions that roll up to the concept of instructional services. So these are kind of composite scores from all of those survey items and using
Correct.
it in an aggregate manner.
Yeah.
So just in case there are any questions or concerns around how students might be interpreting something like enrollment services versus student services,
Right.
they're given more specific language to rate and to respond to.
Correct. So each of those 36 items, right, is put into one of these 5 buckets. And the formal written report, you can see what goes where. Okay, so again, we have these bottom line questions, again, about college experience, meeting expectations, the overall satisfaction, and would they re-enroll if they have the opportunity to start over. So those are those 3 kind of overall questions, and it's great that these are the highest values that we've seen in any iteration of the survey. So again, it's really showing that we're making some improvements, indicating things are going well. And next slide. So here are some kind of key takeaways just to keep in mind that we are all in the room where it happens. We all have a way to contribute and have played a part in our strengths being noted, as well as how we can move forward with our challenges. But again, we're having the highest values that we've seen. We can feel good that students are having their expectations met around registration, payments, their coursework, and having program requirements clear and reasonable is seen as a great strength now, especially as we're offering more programs in the early years of our bachelor degrees. This can really assist in probably recruitment and retention, knowing that things are laid out very clearly what students need to do. But yet when we have this quality of our instruction as a challenge seen continually, that really does indicate we should dive deeper into what students want. Is it that they want an improvement in their employability? that they want to have, certain skill set when they leave here? What goals is it that the quality is not matching, right? So that kind of raises that flag to me. And the survey, it continues to show that it's possible to improve even with ways for our students to interact one-on-one or with their peers in the classroom, or get to know their instructors on a personal level as well. Next slide. So here are kind of our next steps that we're hoping to take place, where we can get some actionable items in place that we can share out this information to more in the college and use both the quantitative and qualitative data for more things. And especially we want to make sure students know that we do hear them, like we are taking note of what they're saying. So it's really vital that we somehow get out the message that we are aware of what they're feeling. So with that, since I've been talking nonstop, we wanted to take an opportunity for some discussions. And I think, Zach, you wanted to kind of.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Cheyenne, for sharing this nice overview. I think that last slide that you just shared was really kind of pragmatic, thinking through, not just the survey data as like an interesting, kind of cognitive exercise to go through, but also then like, what do we do with this? And so, from here, we're going to be taking this information and sharing it with more stakeholder groups around the college. We'll also be sharing it with different projects and initiatives that we know are underway that can make real-time use of this information. So like the example that's shared here with the HLC Student Success Academy, so that we can kind of infuse some of this data into efforts that would most benefit from some of these insights. And so with that in mind, we want to kind of get a pulse from you all. We always attract kind of a broad mix of folks from around the college at these sessions, which is really beneficial for us, and kind of getting a temperature check on if what this team is doing is, being used and kind of contextualized in the right ways. And then also we can kind of crowdsource from you different ideas that might help us to better communicate these types of findings and socialize this type of work. And so we want to get a pulse, from everybody, if, for those of you who might be willing to engage in a couple of these discussion questions around, taking note of those actionable recommendations the students are kind of giving us around, quality of online instruction. Sorry, let me tab back to a couple of the items that were challenges. Thinking about things like developing an academic plan, thinking about how students can, let us know that they're experiencing challenges. Like, we know these things are happening, right? Like the fact that students' responses in this one specific survey might indicate there's a gap here. That doesn't mean that those efforts aren't underway and that like there's not already great work happening to try and do that. But there seems to be a gap in students' awareness of those things, or how they're being kind of like redirected to those types of resources and things. And so, yeah, just curious what folks' thoughts might be on a couple of these kind of question prompts. Apologies that I'm quickly scrolling back through here. So, I'll just kind of like leave it open-ended. You can see a couple of the prompts there, but also don't feel like that's a limit on like what you're willing and able to share. If you have any ideas, any thoughts that immediately come to mind about any of the items that were discussed today, how we can better put this data to use and be able to better support our students in their pursuits with the college. Adam, go for it.
Thank you, Zach, and thank you, Cheyenne, for the presentation. Going to have some Hamilton songs stuck in my head today, and I appreciate you for that. One thing that comes to mind for me, and this is actually really my first time looking at this data in depth, even though I've been with Rio for more than 3 years. I think I've seen the results before, but haven't often been able to make it to these type of sessions. So thank you all for doing this. The only, I guess, sort of reflection that jumps to my mind immediately is that when students encounter challenges in these different areas, like when one student encounters one challenge, that's one thing. But when one student has encountered two, three, four of the challenges, it starts to color their perception, right, of the institution and our services as a whole. And in my area, helping adult education students transition into the college, one thing that I've really found is that once you have like a nexus of challenges that an individual learner has experienced, the only way to disentangle that is through a one-on-one or a small group session where that learner can really voice what they've experienced and ask their questions. And I know that that is challenging because many times their questions may not all fall in areas that I'm a subject matter expert in or have the authority or know how to resolve. But I guess just throwing out there that kind of from the student services side, when a learner's experienced more than one of these challenges, it becomes kind of a nested issue. And having one person to voice it to and at least hear it all seems to really help with the resolution. Because even if if they list four things that didn't go their way or that they didn't understand or that they're frustrated by, even if I only resolve one, but I hear all four, I find that the temperature goes down. So that's just my little reflection upon hearing that and my experience on a learner by learner basis. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Adam. And I think it's a great concept and one that carries a lot of weight. We've got a couple of, I think, efforts underway right now at the college that are still, kind of in their infancy. And so it'll be interesting to see, what progresses with them. I know in community development, there's, grant funded work happening around kind of a navigator, I think is like the language that we're using to like help guide students through the process. You have a dedicated point of contact when you experience these types of challenges who might be more of a generalist in nature and maybe not so much a specialist in one particular function or the other. And then two, just outside of our offices here sits the Title V Avansar grant team, and they've got a similar kind of function in that they are, the student's person, right? Like the student is experiencing an issue, it could be something perhaps an advisor could take care of or an A&R rep could take care of, but the student might not always know those kind of bureaucratic swim lanes that we've enforced on them. And so having somebody to just reach out to and voice those concerns and help direct them to the appropriate resource does seem to be a practice that is kind of shown in the literature to be really effective to students. And so I'll be really curious and optimistic to see what the outcomes of both of those grant programs are, so we can start to talk through what institutionalizing work like that might look like.
That's true. And I'll just add one note on that, which is that here in community development, we're in the early stages of adopting a more kind of generalist coaching model that will intersect across multiple roles, including that navigator role. So again, it is very early, but I think we're working through adoption of some methodologies that might have broader application college-wide in future years that could help us with that. So thank you, Zach.
Thank you. You came off of, camera. So that was a clue to me that you had something to share.
No, I just was done eating and realized my camera wasn't on and just, felt like, hey, my camera should be on, Appreciate
I'll
all
put you on the phone.
you and the team are bringing to us.
Yeah.
And just want to assure folks that this information, we're incorporating it into the information that we're taking into account as we create our new strategic plan. Because it's one of the ways we get to hear, part of the voice of a student, right? It's not the only, but it's certainly one.
I know even for me, I think, for me brought out like, will students get this information? Like that's the goal, right? The goal is that we do make known that we are taking note of what they're saying, how they're feeling, how they're viewing, and taking actions appropriately. So it may be even as simple as just phrasing some of the new initiatives that we put out, or some of the marketing that's put out there to match some of these questions, the language of PSOL and SESI and these different surveys that they're doing. So they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's what's coming out of result of this, right? Or even in some type of social media post, web post, we hear you now are new and improved, or in case you didn't know, something like that. I think it could be. So that's another thing that came to my mind in looking at some of this stuff too, and tackling challenges. As mentioned, the work's being done, but maybe they just aren't aware of it. And so maybe it's just the phrasing and connecting the language.
Yeah, that's a really great insight, Cheyenne, and something that you see in kind of the best practices that these vendors will share is like, once you collect this, circle back with the students and make sure that they understand, like, hey, this wasn't just something we did to check a box, like we're making use of the data. And so I think we'll be looking for better ways to be able to demonstrate that to students. And great segue, because Michelle has re-raised her hand, and I know she's got quite a presence in that scope of work.
Cheyenne said exactly what I was thinking. I think in some cases it is a matter of what communication is going out about these different challenges, and I love even sharing our strengths. I mean, that's, to your point, a good marketing piece. Let people know this is what our college students think about us. But there may be some communication avenues we need to consider using to communicate something we're communicating here that isn't going here, if that makes sense. Like maybe more meeting in the middle of different ideas and sharing them out. What is it they say? Someone needs to hear something so many times. Well, maybe they need to see it on so many different channels.
Or a podcast.
Or a podcast.
All right. Any other thoughts or ideas that folks might have? Otherwise, I will start to move us through to, I think, what is our final slide. All right.
Zach, I know this is kind of more for you and I, but I think we should make sure in our project/initiative form, we have some place to capture if the work is the direct result of another project or initiative that has occurred at Rio. That way we can connect those dots.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Aaron, and in the weeds for this group's purpose, but we're thinking through how, when we're launching these different initiatives and projects that are intentionally focused on optimizing student outcomes, how are we resourcing those things? How are we making sure that they are sustainable and then they have the conditions that are necessary to create success? And so, where possible, we're trying to be able to help folks tell their story about their project and initiative, so they can say, like, to Aaron's point, like, these are the reasons why we're doing this. This is what we heard from students, or it's tied to this particular strategic initiative that the college is really focused on. And so trying to just come up with different ways in which we can put some of this information to use. All right, with that, Cheyenne, I'm gonna hand it back over to you to wrap us up.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Again, this was just an opportunity to get this information going, get the conversation started. As mentioned, a formal report is out there. When we're done recording at another time, if you want to hear me do guns and chips, I can do it pretty well, so and I came decked out in my Hamilton apparel today, so yes. Thanks everyone.
Thank you all.
And thank you, Cheyenne, so much. This was a great presentation, and your commitment to this project and this work is really clear. So thank you for doing this, and thank you for all that you do for the college.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your lunchtime.